All right, thank you all very much for coming again this evening. We have another great program with another great journalist and author, and obviously two very interesting topics. Rahul has kindly agreed to talk about both of these topics, which he's written two great books about. And basically, quickly before I get into the introduction, a bio for him, and he has a very impressive and long bio. This is only a short one because I know I prefer to have you guys listen to him than to me. Just want to first of all thank, I don't know if you want to stand up, Anjali Kuchi, and she's an independent nonprofit consultant. She has her own firm, Anjali Call Consulting. If you're ever in need of an independent nonprofit sort of work, and I'm sure you might be. We're all in the good business for that, of course. And I'd also like to thank Russell Green. I'm not sure if he's here tonight, but from the Baker Institute. And just to let you guys know about our next upcoming event. Next week, we have a program for the young professionals on Wednesday, November 13th, titled Syria and Egypt, the realities on the ground and the U.S. foreign policy dilemmas. And that will be with, you guys might have heard of him, Barak Barfi. He's from the New America Foundation. And he's recently returned from spending time in both Syria and Egypt. He's also spent a lot of time in Libya as well, an expert on Middle East. Basically, not just history and politics, but also exactly what's going on today, and trying to determine what, if any, are the good policy choices for American foreign policy. And as for a bio, Rahul Pandita is a best-selling author, an award-winning journalist. He's one of the foremost authorities on the Maoist insurgency in India, and is a recipient of the 2010 International Red Cross Award for conflict reporting. Pandita has reported from the many front lines of conflict, including Kashmir, Iraq, and Sri Lanka. He was born in the Kashmir Valley, and when he was 14, he and his family were forced into exile. Pandita has previously worked with Indian Express Group, Ajak Tak, I know I'm not saying that right. Ashtak, okay, and Z News. And he has a very impressive bio. I'd encourage you all to look at it if you have any interest in either of these topics. Two great topics. And he has two topics he'll be talking about tonight. The book we're selling tonight is actually only going to be his book related to Kashmir and the Pandit people. And that is the book that is, well, it was up here before, but Our Moon Has Blood Clots, The Exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits. And the other book I'd highly recommend if you get a chance is called Hello Bashtar, which I know I'm not saying as well. And that's the book about the Maoist insurgency in India, which I think is a massive problem that outside of India I don't think many people hear much about. So I'd like to thank you all again for coming, and thank you very much, Rahul, for speaking to us.
Thank you. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me all? Yeah. Thank you, Ronan, for this brief introduction. I've been a journalist for 17 years, and I report from a lot of these conflict areas, which Ronan has mentioned. And not a single day passes when you're out there in the field and you do not learn something new. And sometimes some of these experiences are really life-altering. And there are very small things which you ignore in everyday life, but sometimes in a conflict zone, they end up saving your life. I'll briefly run you through this very favorite story of mine, which many of my friends are tired of hearing. But this is the first time for you, so probably you'll enjoy it. In the March of 2003, I was in Iraq as a young journalist. In fact, in Jordan, Amman, in the neighboring country. There were about 2,500 of us, journalists from all across the world, hoping to get across to Iraq somehow. We did not have visas, the borders were sealed, and there was no way we could enter Iraq. Now, as a journalist, you try to make do of the time and whatever little you can cover in terms of reportage. And in March 2003, there was this constant influx of refugees from Iraq streaming into Jordan, and you would meet them and get a sense of what was happening in Iraq. Also, Jordan has a formidable Palestinian population. So, the people would organize these protest events, which we would cover as a journalist. But there was not much to do and a lot of time to kill. So in due course of time, I made friends with this young driver whose name was Muhammad, and he was of Palestinian origin. After some time, we became real good friends, and he would come to my hotel every morning and ferry me to wherever I was supposed to go. Now, since I had a lot of time to kill, I would ask him questions about his culture and where he lived, what he did, etc. Beyond his duty. And many times in these days, I heard him sing this really silly sing-song ditty in times in Arabic, which went something like this: Bush, bush, shili dak, hadal hachi mai fidak. So it would also come once in a while on the radio. So one day, I found it very funny, and I asked him one day what it meant. So he would speak in broken English. He told me that this meant, Mr. Bush, don't put your hands into Iraq. You will burn your hands. So I said, fair enough. So this kept on happening for many, many days. Till one day, a friend of ours, a journalist, she bribed a couple of Jordanian border officials, and they said, hey, we'll let you cross the Jordan side of the border, but we're not responsible for what happens, what kind of treatment you will receive on the Iraqi border. We said, fair enough, we'll take it. So they let us cross through the Jordanian border, a place called Ruwaishid. And we crossed over, and they made us sign an undertaking that the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan is not responsible for our safety, which we did hurriedly because we wanted to get into Iraq. And right after crossing this 300 meter of no man's land, fair enough, we are at the gates of Iraq, at this border called Al-Karama, and there's a giant statue of Mr. Saddam Hussein there. And the moment we reached there, we're surrounded by these Republican guards who are wearing their long, loose coats with a belt tucked under. They're heavily armed. Now in Jordan, we have picked up a number of Arabic words just to enable ourselves to communicate a little bit. And I tell the chief, there are three of us, I tell the chief, we are Sahafi, which in Arabic or Urdu means journalists. So we are Sahafi journalists. So they ask for my passport, I give them the passport, there is no visa, and suddenly this chief, he becomes very hostile and starts shouting, which I thought were expletives at us in Arabic. And in no time, before we could make sense of what was happening, they surrounded us and they started cocking their AK-47 rifles. Now I look at this journalist friend of mine, her face has gone pale and her blood is drained out of her face. Her ears are red, they are pulsating like that of a rabbit's. The other person, he is absolutely, there are no emotions on his face. And I'm not looking at my own legs, probably they are shaking as well. Some sort of, God knows what happened. In hindsight, I think it was some kind of divine intervention. When I suddenly started singing this silly song, sing-song ditty, which my friend Muhammad had made me learn. I said, Bush, Bush, Shili, da, Hadal, Hachi, my feather. So the first thing happened, the barrels come down, the chief holds his belly, starts rolling with laughter on the road. So the next few minutes, he makes me sing this ditty about 50, 60 times. After which I'm so frustrated, I say to myself, sir, please put a bullet through my head, I'm not going to go through this torture again. Well, they did not kill us, fortunately, but they did not let us enter into Iraq either. So they made us sit back into this vehicle which would take us back into Jordan. Well, we were saved. I had a stiff drink back in Jordan, and 3 days later we finally managed to cross into Iraq, which is a different story. When I returned from Iraq, I realized that I was so stressed that I had forgotten the PIN number of my bank ATM card. Well, it may not be a big deal for you, but it is a big deal for someone like me who has a John Nash kind of fascination with numbers. So that is the kind of challenges these conflict zones throw at you sometimes. I'm going to run you through very quickly because these are very broad topics, and it will really be just touch and go, but I'm hoping that you'll get a sense of a couple of these conflicts. So India, as you know, is a very big country, world's largest democracy. There are a number of, it's a world's fastest growing economy, etc. You have large portions of land where people have progressed, they're moving ahead. It's an IT superpower. It's a nuclear power. It is sending moon missions, space, etc. But it is also the land where in one part of the country there is a major Islamist insurgency brewing up in the northern Indian state of Kashmir. In central and east India, there's perhaps world's biggest communist insurgency growing up, which is almost 1/3 of India we're talking about. And in the northeast of India, we have, it's mellowed down a bit, but at one point of time, it was a major ethnic insurgency. So right now, we're talking about, I'll give you an overview of what the Maoist insurgency is all about, and then I'll talk about my personal journey from Kashmir, because I come from Kashmir Valley, and about 23 years ago, my family and hundreds of thousands of others were forced into exile as an insurgency broke out there. But first, let me give you a glimpse of the Maoist insurgency. The Maoist insurgency is led in many parts in central and east India, about 9 states, which is roughly 1/3 of India. This is really the heart of darkness as far as India is concerned. Many poor people, indigenous tribal people live in this area, which were left untouched by all these development projects which India has undertaken in the last more than 6 decades of independence. No Nehruvian 5-year policies have ever touched them. So they have taken arms against the Indian state. This insurgency is led by a few young men and women. Some of them went to some of India's best schools, but today they are running a radical insurgent group which the Indian Prime Minister has recently called India's biggest internal security threat. Now I'm going to give you a glimpse of what happened. This is a short video shot in 2007. This is a party congress of the umbrella organization of the Maoist parties in India, the Communist Party of India, Maoist. In the Maoist setup, in any communist setup, the central committee of the party is the highest decision-making organization. And the party congress is held every 5 years to make some important decisions in terms of strategies for the next 5 years. So this is a video. This is a long video, but I'll ask Anjali to skip 3 portions. So in the first portion, you'll see these ceremonial parades happening, which will give you an idea of what land I'm talking about. In the second portion, when she skips, it will show you a few people standing in the lines. You can't see their faces. These are the people who are running this insurgency movement. This was shot in 2007. Some of them are already dead or in jail, but you'll get an idea of which area I'm talking about.
And Rahul, is there volume in this?
Yes,
there's sound. Let me just make it. Sorry.
My apologies if I'm talking too fast, because I think I have a lot of area to cover. So.
दुश्मनों का किला हम है लाल सेना जान मुक्ति गुला तुम है लाल सेना जान मुक्ति गुला सेना हम है लाल सेना जान मुक्ति गुला सेना लाल घटी में लाल झंडा करने वाली सेना लाल घटी में लाल
Maoist ideologues which you see in the pictures they are holding. A little there. Yes, this one.
भारत की नवजनवादी क्रांति को सफल कर कलेक्टिव टीम के रूप में नेतृत्व देने का है।
The Maoist party standing there making some important decisions. You can't see their faces because they're being shot by Maoists.
अब तक
They don't want this faces.
दो पार्टी एक ही पार्टी के रूप में मिलने से हमारा ताकत ना कि नंबर इनक्वालिटी बहुत मजबूत होगा। क्वांटिटी से ज़्यादा हमारा क्वालिटी ज़्यादा बढ़ेगा। देश में करोड़ों करोड़ों उत्पीड़ित जनता है। हम हमारा पार्टी नया संगठन करने के लिए इसको सीसी मेंबर्स
All right, so this is the last portion you saw. These are cultural events which happen in this area for many over a long period of time. This is also the tribal population. They're very fond of singing and dancing. So the Maoist party uses it as an instrument of inspiring and motivating people through the songs, etc., urging them for launching an agitation, a revolution against the Indian state. Now, which is the area we're talking about? This is a village in central India where this is a Maoist stronghold, really, and even in this day, there are times when the patients have to be brought to a hospital from a radius of about 200 miles. So that is why there's this huge void left by the Indian government in many places, which has just been filled by the Maoist party. This woman is, her name is Taraka. She is a very important leader of the CBI Maoists. She comes from this area which I'm talking to you about. This is on the Maharashtra-Chhattisgarh border in central India. And she joined the Maoist party in the 80s when the Maoist party came there for recruitment. She's seen a lot of exploitation as a young woman, so she joined them. This is another important leader, a person called Samaya, who is a platoon commander of the CPI Maoists. His family used to work for feudal landlords in a village in central India where they were given a pittance. So when the Maoist party came to his village for recruitment, he also joined them. So there are these large portions in India where people are not even aware that there is an Indian government which is in control of the country. So in many areas, when the Maoists go there, the people think that they are the government, and so they join them. In the early 80s, when the Maoists went into this area for the first time, they undertook a lot of development work among the indigenous people. There was a lot of exploitation by petty forest officers, petty police officers. So when they went, that exploitation was stopped. They launched fights for better wages, better working conditions, etc. But soon enough, like it happens with a lot of these Maoist insurgencies elsewhere in the world, the focus really shifted from bringing in development for the people to fighting the state, and that is what they have been doing. This is a glimpse of one of the memorials they create in their areas in memory of the fallen comrades who have died in police action. In many areas, they run these mobile healthcare units because in these areas disease etc. is very rampant. I was traveling in 1998 in one of these areas in a village where I met this tribal man, a middle-aged tribal man, and I was told that his son had died the previous week. So I spoke to him and I said, "How did your son die?" He said he had died of a disease. Now I knew that in these parts there are many diseases which are rampant, cholera or malaria. It's a malaria endemic area also. So I thought maybe he has died of some disease. But he told me something. So I said, which disease did he die of? He said something which left me completely shocked. He said he had died of a disease called hunger. So here was this man in the late 90s in this shining India who was so resigned to his fate that he thought hunger is a disease. In some of these classes within the Maoist party, there's a lot of emphasis on education. So within a year or 2 years of someone joining the Maoist party, they are made literate. This is a young boy, 14-year-old boy called Suresh, who went to a small school run by the government of India in one of these villages. But he says he got so sick of the food that he ran and joined the Maoist party. Next, please. Here he is. He is a part of their cultural troupe. They go from village to village, asking people to join the so-called revolution. Next, please. This is one of their cultural troops in action in one of these villages. Now, what has happened in the recent years that there has been a lot of sustained military operations in these areas by the Indian state. Sometimes these actions lead to a number of state excesses. Sometimes innocent tribals like these two people are killed by the Indian state. That also leads to an upsurge in recruitment because the people find themselves helpless and then they join the Maoist party. Next, please. Next, please. The security forces in many of these areas do not know how to deal with this insurgency because it's not a frontline border kind of situation where you're fighting against a regular army and you know that your enemy is across the border and you fight against them. In a village when you go, you cannot distinguish between a common villager and a Maoist guerrilla. In many cases, a person you see tilling his fields during the day can turn into a Maoist guerrilla in the night when he picks up the gun. Next, please. Within these areas, they run their own support systems. They have a lot of support in these areas, sympathizers among the local people there, and they run their supply system. We travel with them for weeks sometimes, and mostly we sustain on rice and boiled potatoes. But if we're lucky, we'll get some eggs and chicken also, which is cooked food. Nothing is wasted there. So you cook the chicken along with intestines, etc., internal organs, and we eat it all. The weaponry used by the Maoist party is rudimentary in many ways, but in recent years, they got a lot of other weapon supplies running. They loot a lot of modern weapons from the police parties they ambush in their various parts of influence. They also get a lot of weapons from non-state actors in China through some of the insurgent groups which are active in the northeast India. So they have their people in Thailand who pay money to non-state actors in China. Now in China's context, we know that there's not much difference between non-state and state actors. So a lot of these weapons find their way to Bangladesh and Myanmar, and from these two countries they travel to the northeast India, from there to Calcutta, this eastern city called Calcutta, and from there they make its way to the Maoist heartland. Next, please. Now, who are these Maoists and what is their structure? The main guerrilla force of the CPM Maoists is this army called PLGA. PLG is a common name for any Mao Communist party. In China, when Mao was leading a revolution, he also led this band of people. The band was called PLG, a People's Liberation Guerrilla Army, and one day they hoped they'd turn it into a regular army, which they then called PLA, People's Liberation Army. So China's army now is called the People's Liberation Army. So in this case, the CPM Maoist has an army of about 11,000 men and women, This is perhaps the only organization in the world, insurgent organization in the world, which has a large number of women as its guerrilla force. About 40% of the BLGA, in case of CPM Maoists, are women. So apart from this BLGA, their sympathizers, or what I call part-time Maoists, their strength runs into hundreds of thousands of people. So he's a man, he's a fisherman who catches fish during the day for his livelihood. But if need be, if the Maoist party needs him, then he'll pick up the gun next to him and take part in an ambush against the Indian state security forces. Well, I mentioned earlier that many of these young men and women who are leaders in the CPM Maoists come from urban areas. They went to some of India's best schools. This is a woman called Anuradha Gandhi who comes from a very wealthy family in Mumbai. Her father was a lawyer, and they had her family owned coffee plantations in southern India. She went to one of Mumbai's, perhaps India's, one of prestigious colleges called Elphinstone College. She did an MPhil in sociology, got radicalized and joined the CPM Maoist party. She died of malaria on 12th April 2008. Next please. Here is the only picture of hers taken in 2007, of which you saw in a video earlier. This is her in the party uniform. So what is happening now is that many of these, in the last few months, the CPM Maoist has taken a sort of backseat because of sustained military operations. Many of their top leaders, like Anuradha Gandhi, or her husband Kobar Gandhi, is in jail. He went to Doon School. His father was the chief financial officer of Glaxo, pharmaceutical company Glaxo. He went to Doon School, which is India's premier school. Went to London to pursue a course in chartered accountancy and got radicalized there. He was arrested from Delhi, where he was trying to build sleeper cells for the Maoist party. He was arrested on 20th September 2009. So what is happening now is that the Maoist party has taken a back seat. Many of their leaders have either been, top leaders have either been eliminated or have been put under arrest. So they're facing a leadership crunch right now, because now in the current circumstances, they're not getting the kind of recruitment they used to get at one point of time. Now the Indian government, since they cannot do much in terms of military operations in these areas because of very hard terrain, they're hoping, the Indian state is hoping that after they eliminate the top leadership of the CPM Maoists, this movement is going to fade away. But that is not going to fade away because of simple reason, because the ground conditions on which such a movement is based is still there, so there is nothing absolutely you can do about it. Now I have these journalist friends who in India, some of them. Sorry. Okay. I have some of these journalist friends who work in India's top publications and TV organizations. They often ask me why I put myself into such risk, why life of a poor Adivasi or an indigenous tribal somewhere in central India should be of interest to me. To which I say, now that these people are really important people who understand the meaning of words like inclusive growth and trillion-dollar economy. What I try to tell them is that this empathy for the poor tribals or any other marginalized community comes from my own homelessness, my own uprootedness. I was 14 years old when my family was forced into exile in this North Indian state of Kashmir. Kashmir was a beautiful place. We had such a wonderful life there. We coexisted with the majority Muslim population there. Jammu and Kashmir is the only state where the Muslims are in majority. But the kind of Islam we had in Jammu and Kashmir was a more tolerant Islam, Sufi Islam, where we coexisted with each other for decades. But something really terrible started to happen from late 80s onwards. When we heard murmurs for the first time that few young men had crossed over to a neighboring country and they were receiving arms training from there. Now we dismiss these rumors because we've heard them before, and we've had in the past also some unpleasant unpleasant incidents which happen between any two religious groups every now and then, and we would behave exactly in the same fashion as religious minorities do in any part of the world. We would keep our head low and hope that things would pass and the situation would normalize again. But in 1989, ladies and gentlemen, it did not happen. And by the autumn of 1989, the selective killing of our community began to happen. Now, this is a very small community of Hindus in Kashmir. We are traditionally called Kashmiri Pandits. Pandits in Sanskrit or Hindi means someone who is learned. We were a scholarly community and we have spent our lives in the pursuit of knowledge. It is through my ancestors that Buddhism spread to Central Tibet, to Kashmir. It is one of my ancestors who translated the Buddhist Lotus Sutra into Chinese. The Guru Padmasambhava Rinpoche, who is also known as the second Buddha, spent a lot of time in Kashmir drinking from its knowledge reservoir. History is considered a weak spot in the history of in Indian literature, but one of my 12th century ancestors, a scholar called Kadhana, wrote this magnum opus called Rajtarani, which is considered as one of the world's most important historical works. So we were about a small community of about 350,000, 400,000 people, constituting about 5% of Kashmir Valley's population. And suddenly we were at the receiving end of this brutality from our erstwhile neighbors, friends, and colleagues. And like I said, it all started in 1989. So the killings started from September 14th, 1989. Some very brutal killings happened where many of us were killed on the streets of Kashmir, inside our homes. Professors, doctors, entrepreneurs, unemployed, shopkeepers, housewives, children, even pregnant women. A very young telecommunication engineer who was 37 years old, a man called D.K. Ganju. He used to live in old part of Kashmir, and one day 3 terrorists came to kill him in his home, and he hid himself in the attic on the 3rd floor in a rice drum. So when the terrorists searched for him, they could not find him anywhere, and they left. Now as they were leaving, and in old Srinagar, the houses are very close to each other. As they were leaving, there was this woman in the neighborhood who saw him hiding in that rice drum, and she signaled to the terrorists that the person was hiding there. So the terrorists came back, shot this person in that rice drum and forced his wife to eat the blood-soaked rice. This woman, for example, she was a housewife. She was dragged along with her husband for miles with a jeep, and then she died. In a few months' time, we realized that it was very pre-planned. It was meant to. The killings were brutal because it acted on a very simple formula. Kill one and kill one in such a brutal fashion that it scares thousands into exile. And by the March of 1990, the exile had begun, and for the first time, we had to live in the rest of India in dusty Indian plains. Now, for reference to context of what the dusty Indian plain means in terms of American context, imagine a 70-year-old woman who has lived all her life in New England, for example, and is forced to live in Texas in a torn tent which does not even have a table fan. So these were the kind of settlements this small, peaceful community were forced to live in the summer of 1990. Now what happened behind us in Kashmir Valley? Our houses burned, vandalized, looted, forcefully occupied. This is a picture of one of the burned Pandit houses in Kashmir. Our temples vandalized. This is one of the most ancient temples in the heart of Kashmir Valley. The statues looted, the roof being taken away, and this is what happens to the temple. In 1990, most of us, 99.99% of us had left, but a few handful of families decided to stay back. They mostly came from rural background who had no reference to context of a life outside Kashmir Valley. They had never traveled beyond 20 miles of their house where they had stayed throughout their lives. So they decided to stay back. So what happened to them? In 1998, 23 Kashmiri Pandits lined outside their homes and shot dead in cold blood, including 11 women and 2 children. And this, in all these killings, more than 700 people dead in a matter of few months. In 23 years, ladies and gentlemen, there has not been a single conviction of any terrorist who was responsible for these brutal murders. Here is an interview of a person called Farooq Ahmad Dar, who was arrested for a few years in the June of 1990 and has confessed on television that he was responsible for the killing of 20 Kashmiri Pandits.
Rahul,
we're going to run this.
Can you run that?
अच्छा, आपने कितने लोगों की जाने ली? यानी आपने इतने सारे लोग मार डाले कि आपको ये भी नहीं याद कि आपने कितने लोग मार डाले?
10-12 मारे होंगे।
10-12 की 20?
अब 20 ही मारे।
सारे के सारे कश्मीरी पंडित थे कि कोई मुसलमान भी थे उसमें? कितने मुस्लिम, कितने कश्मीरी पंडित थे? ज़्यादा कश्मीरी पंडित थे?
जी।
क्यों? ऐसा क्यों?
वैसे ऑर्डर मिलता था मैंने कहा।
अच्छा, पहला जिस आदमी को पहले आपने जान से मारा, वो कौन था? पहला कत्ल कब किया आपने? पहला कत्ल कब किया आपने?
पहला मर्डर मैंने सतीश को मारा।
सतीश कौन?
सतीश कुमार
टिक्कू कौन था ये?
जो ऊपर से मतलब ऑर्डर दिया गया कि उसको हिट करो, मैंने किया।
कौन था ये?
पंडित लड़का।
Now the issue, ladies and gentlemen, is not only about Kashmiri Pandits. This is about a radicalization which has swept across Kashmir Valley and is creating a lot of problems for the local population there. There have been so many unsung Malalas in the valley of Kashmir who became victims of the jihadi oppression. Young, innocent Kashmiri Muslim boys and girls who became victims of these terrorist jihadi groups, and there was no one to save them. Now today, why am I telling you this story? This story today is important, ladies and gentlemen, because all of us need to learn from these insurgencies, especially from the Pandit example, because as we now know that these jihadi groups are not localized anymore. It's not about a certain terrorist activity or an incident happening in some remote part of the world where the rest of the world is untouched. Because these jihadi groups have the potential of striking anywhere in the world. I'll give you a small example. In 1999, an IC-814 Indian Airlines flight was hijacked from Delhi and made to land in Kandahar in Afghanistan, which was then under the occupation of the Taliban. The Indian government chose to negotiate with the hijackers and agreed to release 3 terrorists. One of them was a man called Masood Azhar, who is the founder of the radical jihadi group Jaish-e-Mohammed. The second one was a man called Mushtaq Zargar, who is a Kashmiri terrorist responsible for the killing of many innocent Kashmiris, including Kashmiri Pandits. The third one was a young man who was fond of playing chess and indulging in arms wrestling. He had been arrested from Delhi earlier, where he had kidnapped a number of foreign tourists and kept them hostage in a suburb in Delhi. Now the police accidentally stumbled upon him because they had gone there in that particular suburb to investigate a case of cycle theft, and they stumbled upon him accidentally, and he was imprisoned. His name was Umar Sheikh. Now these three terrorists were released in exchange of the hostages of the ill-fated IC-814 flight. Now, as the US investigations revealed later that it was Umar Sheikh who wired about $100,000 2 years later after this episode to a man called Muhammad Atta. Now, I don't think I need to tell anyone in this room who Muhammad Atta was. A year later, after this episode, he is the person who was responsible for the planning, the abduction and the subsequent beheading of a young fellow journalist called Daniel Berg. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's not about the story of Kashmiri Pandits or the story of Kashmir. It is the story of saving the international world order in which all democracies, all responsible citizens have to come together and raise an awareness about such activities, because it cannot be a terrorist in case of Boston and an unidentified gunman in case of Kashmir Valley. And the whole world must understand that the eastern front of war or terror begins from Kashmir. Thank you.
Just maybe open it up to questions. Maybe, I mean, and they're two excellent topics. And I'm sorry if it's a lot to take in, because they're quite different. No, and I think you're doing such a great job doing it so quickly. With regards to the Kashmir, basically exodus of the Pandit people, how was, I mean, you mentioned yourself that it was a largely moderate kind of Sufi, based on moderate Islam that was prevalent in the area. How do you think it was able to be kind of infiltrated, and where did that infiltration come from?
I think a lot of it came from our neighboring country, because the former president of Pakistan, Mr. Ziaul Haq, Kashmir has always been a bone of contention between two states. We have fought 4 wars till 1999, so that always remained a bone of contention. And in the 80s, even before that, there have been many attempts to sort of launch an insurgency movement in Kashmir from Pakistan. And in Ziaul Haq's time, this gained a lot of momentum because he really wanted to do it. So he launched an operation in the mid-80s to infiltrate a lot of these religious institutions. Were infiltrated in Kashmir Valley, where this radical form of Islam is propagated. So there was a lot of poison in the air, and the policies of the Indian government also did not help. The government of India failed to acknowledge those signals which we have been receiving from mid-80s onwards, and we also need to look at it in the larger context, because a lot of things were happening in 1989, 90. In Afghanistan, the Soviets had taken a beating. In Eastern Europe, so many of these movements were taking place. Stuff was happening in Azerbaijan. In mid-January, we watched in horror visuals run on state television in India, where in Baku, in the Azerbaijani capital, this Christian Armenian population was beaten up, expelled from the land where they had lived for so many years. But we thought that this is something which is never going to happen to us, because our own neighbors and friends will stay with us. But unfortunately, that did not happen, and a significant portion of the local population took a part in our brutalization on the streets of Kashmir in 1990. So, the focus really was to cleanse Kashmir Valley and make it a more homogeneous, religious group, so that India does not have any sort of control over it, etc.
And in terms of, you're saying obviously the direct influence from across the border, but in terms of financial influence, like what happened in Afghanistan, did a lot of money come from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states?
Yes, well, it is still coming in many, many ways. A lot of these weapons, which were used against, by the so-called Mujahideen against the Soviet Russia, found their way into Kashmir at that point of time. In fact, some of the propaganda music albums and videos used in Afghanistan during the Soviet regime were used later in Kashmir Valley as well. So these support groups have, they still exist in many parts of the world. The US government has recently, swooped very heavily on this jihadi network of Kashmir with the arrest of one person here. And I believe that information has been shared with the Indian government, but the Indian government has not done enough, even till now, to sort of break that jihadi network in Kashmir and elsewhere in India. The Canadian government has recently found out that about $300,000 US had gone to this terrorist organization called Hizbul Mujahideen, which is active in Kashmir, and the chairman is somewhere in Pakistan. They had there's this NGO called ISNA, which had transferred $300,000 collected on the name of charity to this terrorist organization. So these organizations, like I said, are a part of this globalized international community. These are the same people who appear on YouTube every now and then declaring a jihad against the United States. These are the same people who send their mercenaries to Mumbai and like to listen on the phone the sound of people being shot.
Any questions?
I'm really curious. There has always been a strong communist party in India, and in some states like Kerala, it's been very dominating. My question is, how ideologically is the Maoist group different from the standard communist party? Do the Maos participate politically, and are they related in any way ideologically to the Maoist groups in Nepal, which are part of the Nepalese government?
The fundamental difference between the mainstream communist parties in India and the Maoist party is that the Maoist party does not believe in parliamentary democracy. They call parliament the pigsty. So that is one fundamental difference. So in many instances, the word revisionist is, I think, the most popular word among communist groups. So whenever there's a division, or one particular group thinks there's a division, they are immediately dubbed as revisionists. So the Maoist party thinks the other mainstream communist parties who have participated in elections, like the Communist Party of India Marxist, or the Communist Party of India, or the Communist Party of India Marxist Leninist, they think they are all revisionist. And in many cases, in several parts of India, including West Bengal, there have been instances where the Maoist party has targeted these communist workers and killed them brutally. In the past, there has been a sort of understanding and larger support groups existed between the Maoist party in India and Maoist party in Nepal. So the Maoist party in Nepal looked up to the Indian Maoist leadership for guidance and strategic guidance. Many of them, when they were fighting a war in Nepal against the Nepalese monarchy, they would cross over to India to take sanctuary in the Indian territory. And many of the Maoist leaders from India would travel to Nepal to take part in conferences and strategizing events. But after the Nepalese Maoist party decided to take part in the parliamentary process, so the Indian Maoists were really angry about it, and they wrote a 25-page open letter to their Maoist fellows, Maoist comrades in Nepal, telling them that they were being revisionist. But that apart, I think there still exists some amount of friendship between the two parties, and they meet and they have connections still.
So, back to your first presentation on the problem, the Maoist problem in India, insurgents or whatever you call it. I think we can agree, and you alluded to this, that a lot of it is born out of poverty and joblessness. If they just don't have a better option, right? In terms of fed or clothes or whatever. But if the numbers, you said, there's 11,000 active soldiers or whatever, and 100,000 sympathizers. I mean, it would seem that rehabilitating 11,000 soldiers, or whatever they're called, would not be a big deal if the initiative was there from the government. Or 100,000 people, because at the end of the day, 100,000 people is not that big a number to clothe, feed, and employ. So what's the problem?
Yes. Well, it's not only about these 11,000 people. You're talking about 9-10 states, which are extremely impoverished. Many portions in the state. For example, Maharashtra is the state where you have the financial capital of India, Mumbai. So Mumbai is a fairly prosperous area, and in the same state, you have a place called Gadchiroli. You saw some pictures from that area. So these are extremely impoverished areas, but nothing really has moved for years. I have been to villages during my travels, to places where the last time a block development officer, and in the Indian bureaucratic setup, the block development officer is, the lowest in the pyramid. So the last time a block development officer visited some of these villages was in 1967. So after 1967, nobody has ever visited them. So they are completely bereft of any kind of development. They're suffering from acute hunger, poverty, marginalization, deprivation, ignorance, that they have no access to food, very little access to food or healthcare or education. The problem is that the government is still not serious about bringing in any kind of development in these areas. Now, what has happened is that insurgency has become an excuse for misgovernance, and that is what my first book dealt with largely. That here are these large swathes of land which are ungovernable completely. Now, because there has been a lot of focus on these areas because of the Maoist insurgency. Now, the Indian state claims that we are serious about bringing in development to these areas, but we cannot bring in development because the Maoists are there. But there have been many instances in the recent past where some of the areas, erstwhile Maoist bastions, have been sort of liberated by the Indian security forces. And one was hoping that at least in those areas, some kind of development would be brought in. But that has not been the case so far. So you're talking about this large population. It's not only about 11,000 people. So no seriousness on part of the Indian government.
I have one follow-up question. So okay, maybe you answered that, no seriousness, but you would think that maybe a better option is, instead of going in and developing some of these like far-flung remote areas where, maybe it's tough, right? There's lack of infrastructure everywhere in India, but especially in some of these parts. Why not repatriate these people to some more developed? I mean, there are villages everywhere, right? But there's different levels of villages where, in rural areas where there is still development in some of those areas. So why not move them?
This is a very large. I wish I had the numbers, but this is a very large population you're talking about. You're practically talking about 9 states, which runs into millions of people. It is not humanly possible for a government which cannot bring in development at their doorstep, which cannot even open a hospital at their doorstep, or, I think the world's biggest social security setup is in India right now, by the name of National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, under which every adult in India in these villages has a guarantee of 100 days of job. Now, I think I'm of the personal opinion that this security scheme alone has the capability of reducing the Maoist influence by 60–70%. But only if this scheme was implemented even by 50%. But that is not happening. The case with any totalitarian regime, at the end of the day, the Maoist party is not someone who takes into account everyone into their fold. They are extremely totalitarian in some cases. Killing an innocent villager in one of these villages and terming him as an informer and slitting his throat is not something which is really helping the indigenous tribals. The other problem is that in many such areas, the real people who are suffering more because they're caught between this fight between the Indian state and the Maoist guerrillas. So there are times when the Maoist guerrillas will visit a village in the dead end of the night and demand food. So they'll have to provide that food at the cost of their own bellies in certain cases. And when they leave, the police will come in the morning and accuse them of harboring Maoist guerrillas. So they are stuck. So,
But doesn't the Maoist have conditions for peace talk, that if you meet these conditions, we'll give up our arms?
It's interesting. I was speaking to a senior police officer in India, and he said, look at this list of demands the Maoists have. So let's say 22 demands. So the 22nd demand is the overthrow of the Indian state. But he said that the last, the first 21 demands are something which are already guaranteed to the citizens of this country under the Constitution of India. Land reforms, for example, right to food, right to education. But that is something that the Indian government should have done.
It's more of an awareness problem.
Absolutely.
In terms of what is the hope, what is the future look like, that is one. And the follow-on question is that, do you think any of the political parties, Congress, BJP, or the upcoming Aam Aadmi Party, is there any difference in their approach? Any thoughts on that?
On the Maoist insurgency?
Yeah, on the Maoist insurgency.
I do not have much hope. Frankly, my view is very pessimistic as far as these areas are concerned. And like I said, the Home Ministry of India, the Internal Ministry of India, has this very clear-cut strategy now that they should wipe out, eliminate the top leadership of the Maoists, because in terms of military operations, sustained military operations in these areas, they are not able to do much. So they're hoping that once the Maoist leadership is eliminated, so there will be lull in this area. But that's not going to happen now, because like I said, the ground conditions remain. And the government of India, going by their past record, I don't think there's any seriousness on their part to bring in any kind of development in these areas. So this movement, whether it exists in the form of Maoist movement or any kind of other movement, armed rebellion, it's an ongoing process. I don't think it's going to die away anytime soon. The attitude of the political parties towards the Maoists are the same. So on the ground in New Delhi or from the state capital, they say that Maoists are our biggest enemies and they should be fought. But when it comes to elections, they'll call them patriots sometimes and say their own brothers and try to win their influence. In many parts, in many such parts, and that is really the tragedy of it. The Maoist parties are in connivance with the Maoist party is in connivance with the political parties, the mainstream political parties, all the mainstream political parties. And there are times when they influence the election results in one part of the state or another and make a certain party win. So it's a situation where both are feeding off each other. So the Maoists are getting some benefit from it, the political parties are getting benefit from it. So as long as both of them are getting benefit from it, they are not really bothered about what happens to the innocent people out there. Yes, please.
Short question. The first, from my understanding, the Indian government has done very little to assist the Kashmir Pandit refugees.
Yes.
But what have they done in concrete terms? And the second question is, was there any kind of saving of heritage and art from Kashmir after maybe when things were a little quieter, like Shivling or anything in the art heritage sphere?
Thank you so much. It's an important question. The short answer to your first question is no. They have done nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Could you repeat the question?
Sorry?
Could you repeat the question?
Well, she said whether the Indian government had done anything for the Kashmiri Pandits in Kashmir Valley. And the second question was whether there has been any attempt at saving the cultural heritage which we left behind in Kashmir Valley. So the first answer is absolutely no, and that's why we suffered so much, because in the winter of 1990, when we were being driven out of our homes, and we thought that the Indian government will come to our rescue, it did not happen at all. There was absolutely no one inside. The administration had collapsed completely. So in all these 23 years, they have done a lot of lip service that we are committed to the return of Kashmiri Pandits, and this is the package we'll do. They have given some money here and there, but clearly, it's very short. They have fallen short of our expectation or any other normal expectation. As long as your second question is concerned, I think that's the most important question, and that is the tragedy of Kashmir. On two accounts. One, I think the bigger tragedy for us, more than the exodus itself, is this extreme state of denial at the hands of people who brutalize it there. Now, after these so many years, they are even refusing to acknowledge that something like this happened in 1990. And it reminds me of a story I had read a few years ago in the New York Times about this woman who was an Auschwitz survivor. And after 3 years, she went back to her street in Austria. And after 3 years, she's walking on the street and she meets one of her neighbors who smiles at her and says, "Oh, how have you been? I didn't see you for a while." So that is exactly what happened to us in Kashmir Valley. So in the last many years, there's been absolutely cultural effacement, where the ancient names of many places, which allude to their Hindu significance, they are being erased. At many places, some of these temple lands we had, or temples, they have been vandalized or they have been forcibly occupied. The revenue records of lands have been changed. Sometimes the state government has done it in the name of public utility for widening roads or building up a police station. In the last 23 years, more than 600 temples have been destroyed by the people there, and some of them date even before the Bamyan Buddhas. So complete cultural effacement, and no administration is sight, no one is looking after it.
Just very quick, and we'll go to other questions.
Yes.
I mean, it's obviously a region that the Indian government, like you mentioned, fighting 4 wars with Pakistan, and kind of even when things are relatively okay, there's been a long-standing kind of tension, or kind of almost a Cold War of sorts between the two for a long time. If it's an area that they see as so vital, why did they do absolutely nothing? Why do you think the Indian government didn't do it?
Well, they did a lot of things to prevent the real estate from slipping out of their hands. They put in a lot of Indian army to hold on to the land, and they fought a battle with the insurgent groups, which is still going on for 23 years. But as far as the Kashmiri Pandits, the small community is concerned, there was.
But wouldn't it? I mean, it would just seem as an outsider to have a minority group that obviously wasn't going to be susceptible to, Islamic extremism. Would be good to have them remain in place. Why do you think they didn't?
That's what we thought, and that's why I said, we had a lot of hopes of the Indian government. We thought that they're committed to protection of religious minorities anywhere. That is what they claim, and we are a religious minority in Kashmir, so they'll protect and safeguard our rights. But I guess they were still just not interested, because we do not, like I said, constitute a vote bank. We are not of any significance, and it's the other tragedy in India, and I think that is the bigger tragedy, is that somehow it is not fashionable to talk about certain things. And I'll give an example. When I wrote my previous book, Hello Buster, I made many friends among the left intelligentsia and these 40, 50 people who think they're running the intellectual discourse of this country. And I made many enemies who did not kind of agree with the kind of reportage I was doing from the Maoist areas. Now, when I wrote this book, which talks about the exile of Kashmiri Hindus from Kashmir Valley, the situation completely reversed. So my friends former friends became my enemies because I had spoken about the other religious minority, and my former enemies suddenly started embracing them. But as a writer, I found it very tragic. But as a journalist, I find it that a very interesting place to be, where absolutely no one is happy with it.
Now you said that there was influencing of Kashmiri Pandit Kashmir. Do you think that international organizations have done something? Why has this story been included for these 22 years? And do you think that any international organization has talked about it and thought about it?
I think the dilemma with international policy groups was that they failed to understand certain things about the Kashmir conflict. So here was this set of people who were brutalized by the Indian state. There were certain excesses there. But what they failed to recognize is that there's the same set of people who had brutalized another set of people who happened to be Kashmiri Pandits in this case. So they absolutely chose to ignore that aspect of the story. And many international policy groups also act on what they read in media. So the media in India and elsewhere also chose to ignore this story because somehow this story was not, for a lack of better word, sexy. So the sexy story was in Kashmir Valley, where there was a so-called armed rebellion against the Indian state. But what had happened to this small community of 350,000, 400,000 people, nobody bothered about it because it was any other exodus.
What is the Indian government's policy towards Saudi Arabia on with their extremist funding and supplying weapons and money?
Well, I'm not aware of the policy line they have because I'm not a foreign policy expert. But I think there is an awareness that many of these the funding, for example, for such activities, they in the past they have been traced to Saudi Arabia in many cases. So I think the Indian government is aware of it. Now, what is it doing on ground? You can't do anything in Saudi Arabia, but if there is a network, it exists till Kashmir Valley. So is it doing anything in India? I don't think so. That is why when I quoted the example of the US government coming down heavily on this jihadi group network in the heart of the United States of America, this person called Ghulam Nabi Fai, arrested. He's in jail right now. And that, his network is still Kashmir Valley. And that information was shared with the government of India. But so far, no action has been taken.
Yeah, so you stated that in the early days, the Maoist party in India mainly just wanted to bring development into the rural countries, and later on they started to just fight the government.
Mm-hmm.
Did they just fight the government just for the sake, or do they have other agendas like independency? Because in my understanding, they share a similarity with the Communist Party of China in 1920s and 30s.
Yes,
It started out in the rural countries because they want to bring some development, and then they started out as using this strategy, starting from the rural country and then going to take over the city. So do they have this kind of agenda? The Maoist party in India?
Let me tell you something. Any Maoist party in any part of the world follows in letter and spirit what happened in China in the time of Mr. Mao. So that's absolute. They want to replicate the model where this revolution of the peasants is led from rural areas, and then you surround the urban area, the cities, and then take over the government. So, like I said, the last demand is really the overthrow of the Indian state, which any sane person can tell you in Indian context is an utopia, really. Now, they've tried their best to surround these urban cities. They have a blueprint, a very clear blueprint on how to enter these urban areas, where they want to cash on the industrial unrest. We have had certain incidents in the past where there was a lot of labor unrest in foreign companies like Suzuki, for example, which are some of their factories are set on the outskirts of Delhi city. So there were certain Maoist elements who were active there, and they sort of triggered off this unrest. We also have this poverty, etc. So they were, the plan was to sort of set up these sleeper cell bases in slums, etc. But the problem in urban areas is that they do not have the kind of support system that exists in some of these rural areas. The boon and bane of India is both its middle class. So as long as there is this middle class who are, who exist in cities like Delhi, so it will never see a Maoist resurrection. And if you look at the events of many years, of the last 10 years, 99% of the top Maoist leadership has only been eliminated when they ventured out of their rural sanctuaries and went into urban areas to do some kind of work there, including Kobat Gandhi, whose wife's picture you saw. So in urban areas, they're completely weak, but they're hoping that one day, they'll strengthen themselves there. But that's never going to happen.
Correct.
You sort of answered my question, but what is the present-day role of China, let's say, in providing sort of indirect state sponsorship or support to the Maoist movement, let's say, as we clearly see the connection between Pakistan and various different jihadist groups in India, not just Kashmir?
Yes. There is not been any indication so far that the current Maoist movement has any kind of direct support from China. In the 60s, when the Maoist movement began in India, from this small place called Naxalbari, that is why the Maoist guerrillas in India are also called Naxalites, because the movement started in this place called Naxalbari. That is the time when China provided a lot of direct support. The Chinese newspapers call it a peal of spring thunder. Some of these people you saw, in those placards held by the Maoist guerrillas, some of them had actually gone to China in 1968, and they came trained from there in political ideology and warfare, etc. So in the 60s, there was China's direct involvement. But as far as the current scenario is concerned, so far there has been no evidence of the Chinese direct involvement in the Maoist activities. But like I said, yes, there are certain activities happening in China, the procurement of weapons, etc., and which is in the know-how of the Chinese government. But they're not doing anything about it.
I guess it's a two-part question. So you mentioned obviously the central government hasn't done much for Kashmiri Pandits, but have there been any particular states where the state leaders have stepped up and created incentives? I know maybe, from what I understand, Bal Thackeray did something for them.
Well, yes. In 91, 92, Mr. Bal Thackeray did provide us a small window of opportunity. My generation, we lost everything. Home, when we went into exile. I remember my family had slept for weeks on newspaper sheets because we had left everything behind. So what Mr. Bal Thackeray did in those times is that he provided a small window of opportunity for us, because we are a 100% literate community, and that is a big thing in India, as we all know. So he said that I'll reserve a few seats in the educational institutes in Maharashtra there. So some of these seats were reserved by Mr. Bal Thackeray, and many of us went to those engineering colleges, technical institutes, and that sort of helped us a lot in those days in partially regaining some of what we had lost in Kashmir when later. So yes, individually some leaders. I don't see any other example though, apart from Mr. Bal Thackeray. This small gesture, significant gesture done by Mr. Bal Thackeray. But apart from that, there have been pockets of sympathy here and there, saying that, oh, you are our own Hindu brothers, etc. We should do something for you. But mostly lip service. So Narendra Modi is a very popular leader in India right now. He was the chief minister of a fairly big state in western part of India, and in 2002 he was accused of staying silent when a Hindu mob ran through the streets of Gujarat, killing many innocent Muslims. The incident was triggered off by this small incident where this Hindu passengers traveling in particular coach in a place called Godra in Gujarat were burnt alive, supposedly by a mob of Muslims. So that sort of triggered of the riots, and the state government was absolutely silent about it when these things happened. So there's been a lot of polarization, including the United States of America denying a visa to Mr. Narendra Modi. But of late he has become a very popular leader in India, and in elections which are going to happen early next year, he might become the Prime Minister of India. Now this popularity is not because of his so-called Hindutva agenda. The problem in India right now is that for many years now, in the last 6-7 years, there's been a particular party in power, the old Congress party. And we are suffering this absolute policy paralysis in entire India, where nothing really seems to be working right now. So there's this huge group of people who do not necessarily subscribe to the Hindutva agenda, but they would like to see someone powerful leading the country. So Mr. Narendra Modi is seen as a modern day Mrs. Thatcher in India, who has a steely resolve, because he has done a number of good things in terms of governance in his own state. His development model is a very successful model. Many other states in India are replicating that model. So many among the youngsters who feel very suffocated because of the policies of the current government are supporting him, because they want to see some change in this policy paralysis. Sorry, I forgot what your question was. Yes, as far as Kashmiri Pandits are concerned. Well, as a Kashmiri Pandit, I must tell you that I have absolutely no hope from anyone. Mr. Narendra Modi belongs to this party called Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, which has been in power in the past for about 6 years. They have absolutely done nothing for us. And I don't think Mr. Narendra Modi coming to power will change anything for us.
And maybe we can, I mean, if Rahul's up for, maybe you guys can talk to him as well afterwards. I still want to, I know it's been a great presentation and a lot of questions afterwards. I don't want to keep it going any longer, because I know it's a Tuesday night. Usually we do it on Wednesdays or Thursdays, so it's a little easier for everyone to have to get on with their work. But again, I would just mention that Anjali did bring his latest books. Our Moon Has Blood Clots, and we'll be selling it over there for, I think, almost half price, which is always a great deal. And Rahul has very kindly said he would sign it as well. And so if you would get it over there, and for his other book, Hello Bashtir, I definitely recommend looking it up on Amazon. And
it is available.
Amazon's one of the easiest place to get it. The great book, and obviously both books give you great perspective on both issues. So I just want to say thank you again, all of you, for coming, and thank you very much, Rahul, for coming and speaking to us. Thank you.